weather in the southern Ghana was poor on the day, which delayed departure for about an hour. In Accra, conditions were misty, with visibility of about 5 to 7 kilometers and very low clouds starting at only 700 to 1,100 feet above the ground. While the situation improved slightly later in the morning, the early hours were dominated by haze and overcast skies. In Kumasi, the weather was worse, with drizzle reducing visibility to around 4 kilometers and heavy low clouds sitting just 600 to 900 feet above the ground. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome were available. Only Accra and Kumasi Aerodrome weather were available. There was no formal information on the weather available to the pilots along the flight route. Witnesses reported poor visibility due to fog and rain at Brofuyedru and its environs. Environmental conditions in the Dampier Forest Reserve and its rugged terrain of hills, mountains, created conditions such that over such rugged terrain, you can have turbulence, downdraft, and other phenomena. Now, to look at this is what we're talking about. This is a known aviation phenomena when you have such rugged territory. And what ends up happening is turbulent wind currents occur usually around ridgelines, mountains, and hills, and can generate sink rates in excess of 1,000 feet a minute in moderate wind conditions. These sink conditions can often exist well above the barrier that induces the eddies. We assessed the aircraft to see if it was fit for purpose. The helicopter entered the Ghana Air Force Service in May 2015, having been manufactured in 2012, and it reached its 10-year service threshold on 18th May 2025. Aircrafts have periodic checks to make sure that they are fit for service. The Air Force has 25-hour checks, 50-hour checks, and 100-hour checks. The 10-year check for the helicopter is what was mandated for this helicopter. Now, as is usual, an operator, in this case Ghana Air Force, requested from the manufacturer an extension. And it's normal, happens in civil flying, happens with any type of flying. The manufacturer gave a 90-day extension to 18th August 2025. And basically, the helicopter met all the basic safety requirements. That notwithstanding, it sort of met a 100-hour check. So the Air Force also did a 100-hour check on the helicopter before the flight. The aircraft on the day was declared serviceable and duly signed off by both the engineers and the captain. The flight data report indicates that the helicopter was in good working condition. The helicopter, however, did not have some avionic safety enhancements. As I said before, the aircraft was serviceable and airworthy. The additional safety equipment that the helicopter did not have were things like the helicopter terrain awareness system or the enhanced ground proximity warning system, as you may choose, advanced navigation with terrain mapping, an automatic flight control system, And I would say that these safety equipment would have enhanced situational awareness. For instance, it didn't have an autopilot. That's advanced, the automatic flight control system. So that the crew had to manually fly the plane. So it sort of increases workload. Typically, you want to have a plane that has an autopilot. All the civil planes use autopilots, and the workload on the pilots is very low. It gives you the chance to do things and to think easily, and so on and so forth. Despite all this, the aircraft was in a good condition to fly and met all safety requirements. The investigation has recommended strongly for aircraft with these additional safety enhancements to be acquired immediately for the Air Force. To rule out any potential human causes, we also examined the qualifications, experience, and competence of the crew. The captain has a postgraduate certificate in safety and accident investigation from Cranfield University, UK, in 2024. The captain was a qualified FAA, that's the Federal Aviation Administration, commercial and instrument-rated pilot from Bristol Academy, Florida, USA, in April 2015, 10 years ago. Within the Ghana Air Force, he was recategorized in March 2025 as a Cat C pilot. That is, a pilot qualified to be a captain on the helicopter, the Z9 helicopter. And he had a green instrument rating. In the Air Force, they have gradings for pilots, categories for pilots from A to D. D being, depends on what you call high and low, D being for the initial, sort of, and then you go all the way to A. It's interesting to note that for quite a while, and as at now in the Air Force, the highest category is Cat C. So the pilot was totally competent to be flying this plane. The co-pilot was also a qualified FAA commercial and instrument-rated pilot from Bristol Academy, Florida, and he qualified in April 2023. In December 2024, he was recategorized within the Ghana Air Force as a Category D pilot on helicopter type with a white instrument rating. To further rule out any potential human causes, we examined the medical and psychological records of the crew. A review of the medical and personal records revealed no known medical or psychological conditions in the captain, co-pilot, or technician at the time of flight. All three were described by witnesses as calm, prepared, and professional during the pre-flight activities. Fatigue or medication was not considered to have materially affected their performance on the day of flight. Now to the sequence of events. The flight departed Accra under visual flight rules in marginal weather. The flight to Brofuyedru was uneventful. Brofuyedru is approximately 90 miles from Accra, about 10 miles from Obuasi. As the flight approached Obuasi, visibility deteriorated rapidly due to mist and low clouds. At 9:56, the crew entered IMC, which is Instrument Meteorological Conditions. To the layman, it is they flew into clouds because they no longer could stay away from the clouds, so they flew into clouds and transitioned to IFR. Now, IFR is Instrument Flight Rules. So what it means is they now transitioned from navigating using visual cues to now navigation solely on the aircraft's instruments. The crew then initiated a climb to cross terrain that they were aware of. They initiated the climb to cross the terrain. Seconds before impact, the crew stated that they could see the high ground below, so they had gone over it. Suddenly thereafter, the helicopter that was flying up, without any change in its power or in the pitch which we use to go up and down, suddenly lost height and impacted a ridgeline at about 1370 feet above sea level. And this was about 6.5 miles from the destination, and this happened at 9:58. Said all that. Good. Now, the dotted blue line is what the planned track had been. The purple line is what the aircraft actually flew. And that took place because it was avoiding clouds and so on and ended up where it was. Now to our findings. The helicopter was airworthy, but it lacked additional safety enhancements. For instance, the terrain awareness warning system. Now, you know, the terrain awareness warning system, for instance, is predictive. So what it does is it tells you, warns you, it gives you a better picture of the situation and puts the pilots in a better, it gives them, puts them in a position to make better judgments, to be able to see everything and be able to foretell if there are any things that could possibly create a problem. But they lack the additional safety enhancements required for the weather phenomenon over that terrain. There was adverse weather, there was limited visibility, there was rising rugged terrain, with this terrain induced complicating factors, and there were no ground-based navigational route aids en route. The investigation would like to say that from everything they gathered, the emergency response was very timely. The fact that the first responders managed to get to the site in about 2 hours was remarkable because the terrain has very steep slopes. It was raining, it was slippery. So it wasn't the easiest thing to do. When we went to the site, it was also raining and it was very slippery. And we struggled using sticks and everything to try to get up there. So looking at everything, we would say very confidently that the emergency response was very timely. The investigation determined that the accident was caused by the sudden loss of altitude and lift due to downdraft. This loss of altitude without change in power or pitch altitude is consistent with downdraft associated with changing environmental conditions over high terrain. In our findings also, we said there's limited national navigational capacity, a capability for en route and remote area weather services. We also looked at training and realized that the Air Force doesn't have much simulator training. We looked at flight monitoring and realized that there was no flight data monitoring also taking place. For flight following and tracking of aircrafts, we realized that it was also not there. There's no secondary surveillance radar, no automatic dependent surveillance broadcasts, or any other real-time tracking of aircraft. our safety recommendations. There is a definite need to modernize the fleet of the Ghana Air Force. We have recommended that the Air Force acquire modern aircraft with terrain avoidance warning systems and modern navigation systems. That the aircraft should have cockpit voice recorders and flight data recorders, which are the audiovisual capable types. That the Air Force should invest in simulators for recurrent training. That they contract certified aviation weather provider or providers, and that Ghana as a nation should try to have en route navigational aids, especially in remote areas. The Air Force should seriously consider establishing flight data monitoring and en route tracking systems. And finally, we believe that they need to acquire ground support equipment, modernize what they have. In conclusion, the helicopter accident was an unfortunate and sudden weather-related accident. Implementing the safety recommendations will prevent the reoccurrence of future accidents. At this time, before I take any questions, I just want to give a few acknowledgements. I'd like to acknowledge the efforts and the support that the team had from the National Security Secretariat, led by the National Security Coordinator. It made what was a really difficult job for us much easier to do, and encouraged us to do and persevere to come up with these results. I'd like to say thank you also to the US team that joined us for a period of the investigation, the Chinese